The fluorescent lights of Boston Logan International Airport hummed above me as I clutched the small velvet box in my coat pocket. Inside was a vintage watch I'd spent 3 months tracking down. A 1960s Omega Seamaster, identical to the one Derek's late father had worn in every photograph from his youth. Our 8th wedding anniversary wasn't for another 2 weeks, but I couldn't wait. The look on his face when he opened it would be worth every penny of the $4,000 I'd secretly saved. My flight to Chicago didn't board for another 40 minutes, and I found myself smiling at strangers like some love-struck teenager. The woman at the coffee kiosk probably thought I was unhinged, grinning while ordering a simple black coffee, but I didn't care. After 2 years of Derek's increasingly frequent business trips, after countless dinners alone and weekends spent waiting for him to come home, I was finally doing something spontaneous, something romantic, something that would remind us both why we fell in love in the first place. I settled into a chair near my gate and pulled out my phone, resisting the urge to text him. The whole point was the surprise. I imagined walking into his hotel room, seeing his eyes widen, feeling his arms wrap around me. We'd order room service, drink champagne, make love like we used to before life got so complicated, before his promotion to senior consultant at Whitmore Financial meant he was gone more than he was home. My mind drifted to the night he'd told me about this Chicago trip. 3 days of meetings, he'd said, something about restructuring a client's portfolio. He'd been distracted during dinner, scrolling through emails, barely touching the lasagna I'd made from scratch. When I asked if everything was okay, he'd smiled that charming smile and said, "Just work stuff, Mur. Nothing for you to worry about." I'd believed him. I always believed him. The boarding announcement crackled through the speakers, and I gathered my carry-on bag, a small overnight case with just enough for 2 days of surprises. I told my boss at the architecture firm that I had a family emergency. Jennifer had raised an eyebrow, but signed off on the time without questions. She knew I never took days off, not even when I had the flu last winter, and probably should have stayed home instead of sneezing through client presentations. As the plane lifted off the tarmac, I watched Boston shrink beneath the clouds and tried to remember the last time Derek and I had taken a trip together. Our 5th anniversary, I realized with a pang. 3 years ago. A long weekend in Vermont that had started beautifully and ended with him on his phone for most of the final day, apologizing between calls about some crisis at work. There were always crises at work. I pulled out my laptop and tried to distract myself with the project I was leading, a sustainable housing development in Cambridge that had consumed most of my professional energy for the past year. The designs were nearly finalized, and we were up for a regional architecture award. But even the satisfaction of that couldn't compete with the flutter in my chest thinking about seeing Derek. The flight attendant came by with drinks, and I ordered a small bottle of wine, feeling reckless. I almost never drank alone, but this wasn't really drinking alone, I told myself. This was celebrating the start of something good, a reset for our marriage. A reminder that beneath the routines and responsibilities, we were still Meredith and Derek, the couple who'd fallen in love at a crowded bar in Cambridge 11 years ago when he'd accidentally knocked my drink onto my white silk blouse and spent the next hour apologizing while making me laugh harder than I had in years. The wine warmed my throat, and I let myself sink into memories. Our wedding in Martha's Vineyard, his mother's garden overflowing with white roses. The tiny apartment we'd shared in Somerville before I got my first real job, and we could afford something bigger. The way he used to leave little notes on the bathroom mirror, dumb jokes or sweet nothings written in his messy handwriting. When had those stopped? I couldn't pinpoint an exact moment. They just faded away, like so many things. I'd told myself it was normal, that all marriages settled into comfortable patterns. My own parents had been married for 42 years, and I'd never seen my father leave notes for my mother. That didn't mean they didn't love each other. But lately, there had been other things. Small things I'd cataloged and then deliberately uncatalogued, filing them away in a mental drawer labeled "Don't Overthink." The cologne I didn't recognize when he came home from San Francisco last month. "New client gift," he'd said, and I'd nodded and kissed his cheek and pretended I couldn't smell the faint undertone of something floral beneath the cedar and sandalwood. The way he angled his phone away from me when texting late at night. Work emergency. Always a work emergency. Fingers flying across the screen at 11 p.m. while I pretended to read beside him in bed. The distance in his eyes when we made love. Less and less frequently these days. The sense that even when he was physically present, some essential part of him was somewhere else entirely. I finished my wine and closed my eyes, pushing those thoughts away. I was being paranoid, insecure, the kind of suspicious wife I'd always sworn I'd never become. Derek loved me. He told me so every time he left for a trip, kissing my forehead and promising to call every night. He did call. Short calls usually with background noise that could have been a hotel room or a restaurant or anywhere. Really. But he called. That had to mean something. The plane began its descent into O'Hare, and I pressed my face to the window, watching the city emerge from the clouds. Chicago sprawled beneath me, gray and magnificent, the lake a dark blue curve along its eastern edge. I'd only been here once before, years ago, for an architecture conference. Derek had come with me that time, and we'd spent an afternoon at the Art Institute, holding hands like tourists. Maybe we'd go back there tomorrow, I thought. After the surprise, after a night together, we could explore the city and rediscover each other. I collected my bag and joined the stream of passengers shuffling toward the terminal. The hotel was downtown, the Palmer House Hilton, which I knew because I'd seen the charge on our shared credit card statement. Derek didn't know I paid attention to those things. He handled most of our finances, something I'd agreed to early in our marriage because he was the one with the MBA, the one who understood investments and portfolios and all the things that made my eyes glaze over. But lately, I'd started looking more closely. Not because I suspected anything, I told myself, just because I wanted to be more involved, more of a partner in our life together. The Uber from the airport took forever, stuck in the kind of traffic that made me grateful I lived in Boston, where at least the gridlock came with history. I texted my mother to let her know I'd arrived safely, carefully omitting the reason for my trip. She'd never understood my spontaneous side, such as it was. "You're too sensible for grand gestures," she'd said once, and I'd taken it as a compliment even though I wasn't sure she'd meant it that way. By the time the car pulled up to the hotel, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the city in shades of gold and amber. I paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was it. The moment I'd been planning for weeks. The lobby of the Palmer House was exactly as I remembered. All gilded ceilings and marble floors, and that particular brand of old money elegance that made you want to whisper. I approached the front desk and gave my most charming smile. "Hi, I'm hoping you can help me. My husband is staying here, Derek Ashworth. I wanted to surprise him for our anniversary." The clerk, a young man with a name tag reading Marcus, typed something into his computer. "Room 1847, he said. "Would you like me to call up and announce you?" No, that would ruin the surprise. I leaned in conspiratorially. "Could you possibly make me a key? I know it's against policy, but it's our 8th anniversary, and I flew all the way from Boston." Marcus hesitated, then smiled. "I'll need to see your ID and confirm you're listed on the reservation." I wasn't listed on the reservation. Why would I be? But I showed him my driver's license anyway, and he typed some more, and something in his expression shifted. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't issue a key. But you're welcome to go up and knock." I thanked him, perhaps too enthusiastically, and headed for the elevators. Room 1847, 18th floor. The numbers glowed as I ascended, and I practiced my surprised face in the mirrored walls, then laughed at myself for being ridiculous. The hallway was quiet, carpeted in deep burgundy, lined with doors that all looked the same. I counted my way to 1847 and stood there for a moment, my hand raised to knock, my heart so loud I was sure anyone inside could hear it. I knocked. For a long moment, nothing. Then footsteps, the soft padding of bare feet on carpet, the click of the deadbolt. The door opened, and a woman stood there in a white hotel bathrobe, her dark hair damp from a recent shower, her face flushed and relaxed in a way that spoke of recent intimacy. "Can I help you?" she asked, and somewhere in the room behind her, I heard the sound of running water, a shower, a man's voice, humming something tuneless and content. Derek's voice. I knew that hum. Had heard it 1,000 times while he shaved in the morning, while he cooked breakfast on lazy Sundays, while he held me in his arms and we swayed to music only we could hear. The woman's smile faltered. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Who is it, babe? Derek called from the bathroom, and the water shut off, and I heard him step out, heard the rustle of a towel, heard his footsteps approaching the door where I stood frozen, my hand still raised as though to knock on a door that was already open. He appeared behind the woman, a towel wrapped around his waist, water droplets still clinging to his shoulders, and for one impossible moment, his face wore the exact expression I'd imagined all those hours on the plane. Surprise. But not the good kind. Time does strange things in moments of catastrophe. It stretches and compresses simultaneously, turning seconds into hours and hours into seconds. I stood in that hotel doorway, watching my husband's face cycle through emotions like a slot machine, surprise giving way to panic, giving way to something that looked almost like annoyance, and I felt as though I were watching the whole scene from somewhere outside my own body. Meredith. My name in his mouth sounded like a foreign word, something he'd never quite learned to pronounce correctly. What are you doing here? Not, I can explain. Not, this isn't what it looks like. Just, what are you doing here? As though I were the one who'd done something unexpected, something wrong. The woman in the bathrobe looked between us, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror. Meredith? As in, your wife Meredith? The one you told me you divorced 2 years ago? The words hit me like physical blows. Divorced. 2 years ago. I heard myself make a sound, something between a laugh and a sob, and my hand finally dropped from its frozen position. Divorced, I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. He told you we were divorced. Vanessa, let me handle this, Derek said, and his voice had taken on that smooth, controlled tone he used during difficult client negotiations. The voice that said he was in charge, he knew what was best. Everyone should just calm down and let him fix things. Handle this? Vanessa stepped back from the door, her hand rising to cover her mouth. Derek, what the hell is going on? I should have left. That would have been the sensible thing, the Meredith thing, to turn and walk away and fall apart in private. But something had cracked inside me when that door opened, and now a different version of myself was emerging from the wreckage. I stepped into the room. It was a beautiful room, the kind of room Derek always insisted on when he traveled. King bed with rumpled sheets, champagne bucket on the nightstand, 2 glasses, one still bearing the lipstick mark of the woman who now stood against the far wall with her arms wrapped around herself. Clothes scattered on the floor, his suit jacket over a chair, her dress pooled by the bathroom door like a shed skin. 18 months, I said, and I wasn't sure where the certainty came from, only that I knew it was true. You've been seeing her for 18 months. Derek's jaw tightened. Let's go somewhere and talk about this. Privately. Answer the question. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I turned to Vanessa, who looked like she might vomit. When did he tell you he was divorced? She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. 18 months ago. We met at a conference in Denver. He said his marriage ended because his wife was cold, emotionally unavailable. He said you kept the house in Boston and he moved to a condo downtown. He said you'd agreed to tell people you were still together for professional reasons. Her voice broke. I believed him. God, I'm such an idiot. You're not an idiot, I heard myself say, and some part of me marveled at my own calm. He's very convincing. I believed him too. Derek ran his hand through his wet hair, and I watched him calculate, watched him search for the angle that would let him regain control of this situation. I'd seen him do it 100 times in business contexts. That moment when the deal was falling apart and he had to find a new approach. Okay, he said finally. Okay, this isn't ideal. But Meredith, you have to understand, our marriage hasn't been working for years. You know that as well as I do. No, I said. I don't know that. You're always at work. You're obsessed with your projects. When's the last time you actually focused on us? Last Tuesday, when I made your favorite dinner and you barely looked at me. Last month, when I tried to plan a weekend getaway and you said you were too busy. 3 hours ago, when I got on a plane to surprise you because I thought our marriage was worth fighting for. My voice cracked on the last words, and I hated myself for it. I didn't want to cry in front of him. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. Vanessa had sunk onto the edge of the bed, her face in her hands. "I can't believe this," she kept saying. "I can't believe this." "Vanessa, please," Derek said, moving toward her, and something in his voice made my stomach turn. Tenderness. Real tenderness. The kind I hadn't heard directed at me in years. I turned and walked out of the room. I made it to the elevator before the tears started. Made it to the lobby before the sobs came. Made it to the street before my legs gave out, and I had to sit on a bench outside the hotel, gulping air like a drowning woman. The Chicago evening swirled around me, people in business suits and tourists with cameras, everyone going about their lives while mine collapsed into rubble. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and stared at the home screen, at the photo of Derek and me at my cousin's wedding last summer, both of us smiling, his arm around my waist, looking for all the world like a happy couple. I should call someone. My mother? No. She'd say something about how she'd never quite trusted Derek, and I couldn't bear to hear it right now. My sister Amy was in Portugal on vacation. My best friend Rachel would drop everything and fly here. But did I really want to drag her into this mess? I opened my contacts and scrolled through the names. All these people who thought they knew my life, who would gasp and express sympathy and probably gossip about it with their other friends. Did you hear about Meredith Ashworth? Walked in on her husband with another woman? In a hotel room? Can you imagine? Yes, I could imagine, because I'd just lived it. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the sky to darken fully, for the streetlights to flicker on, for the temperature to drop enough that I started shivering in my light coat. Long enough for the shock to begin hardening into something else, something that felt almost like clarity. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. "We need to talk. Where are you?" I deleted it without responding. Another buzz, another text. "Meredith, this is Vanessa. Derek gave me your number. I know you probably hate me, but I think we should talk." I had no idea. I swear to you, I had no idea. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, "I don't hate you. I believe you. I'm sitting outside the hotel." 10 minutes later, Vanessa appeared through the lobby doors, now dressed in jeans and a sweater, her face blotchy from crying. She looked around, spotted me, and hesitated before walking over. "Can I sit?" she asked. I nodded. We sat in silence for a while, two women who'd been played by the same man, watching the city lights reflect off the darkened windows of office buildings. "I feel like such a fool," Vanessa finally said. "All those signs I ignored. The way he could never stay the whole night. The excuses about why I couldn't come to Boston. The business trips that always seemed to coincide with holidays." She laughed bitterly. "Last Christmas, he told me he had to visit his sick mother. Was he with you?" "He told me he had an emergency client meeting in New York." The words came out flat, emotionless. "His mother was at our house for dinner. She's perfectly healthy." "His mother knew?" "Apparently." Vanessa turned to look at me, her eyes wide. "You didn't know that until just now?" I shook my head. I was still processing, still turning over all the pieces of my life and finding that none of them fit together the way I'd thought they did. "There's something else," Vanessa said quietly. "When I was getting dressed, after you left, Derek's phone kept buzzing. He was in the shower and I looked. I know I shouldn't have, but after everything..." She pulled out her own phone and showed me a screenshot. A text conversation between Derek and someone named V2 with a heart emoji after the name. "V2?" I said. "I'm V in his phone. Vanessa." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Meredith, I don't think I'm the only one." The bench seemed to tilt beneath me. I gripped the armrest and forced myself to breathe. One mistress was a betrayal. Two mistresses was a pattern, a lifestyle, a complete and deliberate architecture of lies that must have taken extraordinary effort to maintain. "Who is she?" I asked. "I don't know." The messages were intimate, recent. He was making plans to see her next week in Miami. Miami, where Derek was supposed to be going for another client meeting the week after next. I stood up abruptly, unable to sit still any longer. I need to walk, I said. I need to think. Vanessa stood too. Do you want company, or do you want to be alone? I don't know, I admitted. I don't know anything right now. We walked together toward the lake, two strangers bonded by shared destruction. The night air was cold, sharp, with the promise of approaching autumn, and I welcomed the discomfort. It felt more real than the numbness spreading through my chest. How did you meet him? I asked, because focusing on her story was easier than facing my own. A financial planning conference in Denver, she said. I'm an accountant. He was charming, funny, attentive. He told me about his ex-wife, made her sound cold, distant. He said the marriage fell apart because she cared more about her career than about him. I laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet night. He used to tell me he loved how ambitious I was. One of the things that attracted him to me, he said. He told me the same thing. We reached the edge of Lake Michigan, the water dark and vast before us, city lights scattered across its surface like fallen stars. I thought about all the dinners I'd cooked, all the conferences I'd attended alone because he was traveling, all the nights I'd gone to bed early because he was working late. I supported him through his MBA, I said, the memories surfacing unbidden. Worked 2 jobs while he was in school. When he graduated, I thought now it was our turn, our chance to build something together. When did things change? 2 years ago, when he got promoted. The traveling started, and he was always stressed, always distracted. I told myself it was just a phase, that once he settled into the new role, things would go back to normal. But they never had. And now I understood why. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Derek's mother's name, and something cold settled in my stomach. It's my mother-in-law, I said, staring at the screen. Are you going to answer? I thought about letting it go to voicemail, but some masochistic part of me needed to know, needed to understand the full scope of my betrayal. I answered. Meredith? Patricia Ashworth's voice was crisp, controlled, with an undertone of irritation I'd never noticed before. Derek called me. He told me what happened. Did he? I said flatly. This is very unfortunate, but I hope you'll consider handling this like an adult. There's no need for dramatics. Dramatics. The word came out like a blade. I walked in on your son with another woman, Patricia. A woman he's been seeing for 18 months while telling her we were divorced. Marriages go through difficult patches. What matters is how you move forward. You knew. It wasn't a question. You've known all along. The silence on the other end of the line told me everything. Derek deserves to be happy, Patricia finally said. You should have been a better wife, more attentive, more accommodating. I hung up. Vanessa was watching me, her expression a mirror of my own devastation. His mother covered for him? His mother thinks I deserved it. I sat down on a bench facing the water, the cold seeping through my coat, and let myself feel it all. The betrayal wasn't just Derek. It was the whole family I'd tried so hard to belong to, the in-laws I'd catered to and impressed and never quite been good enough for. They'd known. They'd all known. And they'd looked me in the eye at family dinners and smiled and passed the potatoes and talked about how lucky Derek was to have me. Vanessa sat beside me, and neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, she said, "What are you going to do?" I stared at the dark water, at the lights of the city reflected in its depths, at the vast unknown stretching out before me. I'm going to find out everything, I said, and then I'm going to destroy him. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I checked into a different hotel, a small boutique place on the north side of the city, and spent hours on my laptop going through every financial record I could access. The joint accounts Derek had assured me were fine. The credit card statements I'd glanced at but never scrutinized. The mortgage paperwork for our house in Brookline that I'd signed without reading closely because he'd said it was all standard. By 3 a.m, I had a list of charges that painted a damning picture. Jewelry stores I'd never received anything from. Restaurants I'd never eaten at. A weekend at a spa in the Berkshires that he'd told me was a corporate retreat. Hotel rooms in cities where he supposedly had client dinners. But it was the transfer I found at 4:30 a.m. that made me sit back in my chair, my hands shaking. $47,000. Moved from our joint savings account over the past 18 months in small increments that stayed under the threshold that would have triggered automatic notifications. Transferred to an account I'd never seen before. $47,000. Gone. Used, presumably, to fund his double life. I called Rachel at 5 a.m., not caring that it was even earlier in Boston. "Mur?" Her voice was groggy, alarmed. "What's wrong?" I told her everything. By 8 a.m., Rachel had booked a flight to Chicago. By noon, she was sitting beside me in my hotel room, holding my hand while I stared at the wall. "You need a lawyer," she said. "A really good one." "I know. And you need to document everything. Every charge, every lie, every transfer, before he has a chance to cover his tracks." "I know." She squeezed my hand. "Mur, talk to me. You're scaring me." I turned to look at her, this woman who'd been my best friend since college, who'd stood beside me at my wedding and caught my bouquet, and joked that Derek had better treat me right or she'd come for him. "I feel like I've been living in a dream," I said. "For 8 years, I thought I knew who I was. Derek's wife. Part of the Ashworth family. Building a life together." I shook my head. None of it was real. It was all just a stage set, and I was the only one who didn't know we were acting. "That's not true," Rachel said firmly. "Your career is real. Your talent is real. Your friendships are real. He doesn't get to take those from you." My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. "Can we meet?" I found something. We met at a coffee shop near my hotel, Rachel accompanying me with the protective ferocity of a guard dog. Vanessa looked even worse than she had the night before. Dark circles under her eyes, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. "I went through his phone while he was sleeping," she said without preamble. "I know it was wrong, but I had to know." "What did you find?" She slid a folded piece of paper across the table. I wrote down everything. The texts to V2, whoever she is, the calendar entries, the notes. I unfolded the paper and scanned the contents. Dates, times, locations. A second secret life layered on top of the first. And something else. Something that made my blood run cold. "He transferred money to her too," Vanessa said. $15,000 over the past 6 months. To someone named Christina. Christina. I said the name aloud, testing it. This stranger who'd apparently been receiving my money along with my husband's attention. "There's more," Vanessa said. "I looked up his and my supposed plans. The vacation we were supposed to take next month? To Aruba? The one he said he'd paid for?" She laughed bitterly. "He charged it to a credit card in your name. A card I'm guessing you didn't know about." Rachel swore under her breath. I thought about all the times I'd asked Derek about our finances. All the times he'd smiled and said everything was fine, that I should focus on my work and let him handle the boring stuff. All the times I'd trusted him because that's what marriage meant. Trusting someone with your whole life. "I need to call my firm," I said. "I need to ask for more time off." "Mur, you can't just disappear from work," Rachel said. "You've got that award ceremony next month." The award ceremony. I'd almost forgotten. The New England Sustainable Design Award for the Cambridge housing project I'd been leading for the past year. The project I'd poured myself into while my husband was pouring himself into other women. "I won't disappear," I said, "but I need time to figure this out." Over the next 3 days, I became someone I didn't recognize. I hired a forensic accountant. I contacted a divorce lawyer, one of the best in Massachusetts, whose retainer alone cost more than I'd ever spent on anything except our house. I documented every lie, every charge, every transfer. And I found Christina. She was 30 years old, a marketing manager at a company Derek had supposedly consulted for. Their relationship had started 7 months ago, overlapping with Vanessa's, overlapping with our marriage. Derek had told Christina that he was separated but not yet divorced, that his wife was making things difficult, that he was working on getting free. 3 women, 3 different stories, 3 elaborate constructions of lies, each one requiring constant maintenance, each one built on the assumption that we would never compare notes. I met with Christina in person, at her request. She cried. She apologized. She said she'd started to suspect something was wrong but hadn't wanted to believe it, She was younger than me, younger than Vanessa, with the kind of wide-eyed earnestness that would have made her easy prey for a man like Derek. "He told me you were the problem," she said through her tears, "that you were cold and unloving and he'd tried everything to make it work." "He told Vanessa the same thing," I said. "Apparently, I'm a very consistent villain in his stories." Derek called me 17 times that week. I didn't answer. He texted long, rambling messages that ranged from apologetic to accusatory to pleading. He blamed his childhood, his stress at work, his unmet needs. He never once acknowledged that what he'd done was wrong. His mother called too, and his sister Emily, who tried to explain that Derek had always been complicated and that I should try to understand where he's coming from. "Where he's coming from," I repeated. "He stole $47,000 from our savings. He's been sleeping with at least 2 other women while married to me. He lied to all of us." "Marriages are complicated," Emily said, in that patronizing tone she'd always used with me, the tone that suggested I was too simple to understand the nuances of their sophisticated family. "No," I said. "This isn't complicated. This is a man who chose to betray everyone who trusted him. And you all helped him do it." I hung up and blocked her number. The worst call came on my last night in Chicago, as I was packing to fly back to Boston. It was my own mother. "Patricia Ashworth called me," she said, her voice tight with something I couldn't identify. She told me what happened. "Mom, she said you ambushed Derek, that you showed up unannounced and caused a scene." I sat down on the bed, suddenly exhausted. "Is that what she said?" "She said there are 2 sides to every story." My mother paused. "Meredith, I need to know. Is there something you're not telling me?" And there it was, the doubt. Even my own mother, presented with the Ashworth family's version of events, wasn't sure if she should believe her own daughter. "He was cheating on me, Mom. For 18 months at least, with multiple women. He stole money from our accounts. He lied to everyone, including me." The silence stretched out, and I found myself holding my breath. "I always thought that boy was too good to be true," my mother finally said, and the relief that washed through me was so intense I nearly cried. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry this happened to you." I did cry then. For the first time since that door had opened, I let myself fall apart completely, sobbing into the phone while my mother made soothing sounds 300 miles away. "Come home," she said. "We'll figure this out together." I flew back to Boston the next morning, but I didn't go home. I couldn't face the house Derek and I had shared. The house filled with photographs of our lying life. The house that I now knew might not even legally belong to me. Instead, I went to Rachel's apartment and slept for 14 hours straight. When I woke up, I had a text from Vanessa. "I hope you're okay. I know this is strange, but I'm grateful we met. Take care of yourself." I had an email from my lawyer. "Initial review complete. We need to talk." And I had a voicemail from my boss at the architecture firm. "Meredith, I don't know what's going on, but the committee just announced the award finalists. You're on the list. Call me when you can." I stared at my phone for a long moment. Then I got up, took a shower, and started making plans. Derek had built his life on the assumption that the women in it would stay quiet, stay compliant, stay in their assigned roles. He'd assumed I would fall apart, crawl back, beg for an explanation that would let me pretend none of this had happened. He didn't know me at all. The offices of Morrison and Chen, attorneys at law, occupied the top floor of a converted brownstone in Beacon Hill. I'd found Eleanor Chen through a colleague whose own messy divorce had been handled with surgical precision. "She's not cheap," the colleague had warned, "but she's worth every penny." I was about to find out just how many pennies this would cost. "The good news," Eleanor said, spreading documents across her mahogany desk, "is that you have excellent documentation. The financial records you've compiled, the statements from the other women, the forensic accountant's preliminary findings, all of this creates a very clear picture. And the bad news?" Eleanor's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes softened with what might have been sympathy. "Your husband moved quickly after you left Chicago. He's retained his own counsel. They're preparing a narrative that paints you as an unstable spouse who made wild accusations without evidence." "Without evidence?" "I caught him with another woman, in his hotel room. Who is prepared to testify that she believed Derek was divorced, that she was as deceived as you were? Eleanor folded her hands on the desk. The Ashworth family has resources, Meredith, and they're clearly prepared to use them. I thought about Patricia's voice on the phone. Derek deserves to be happy. The righteous certainty of a mother who believed her son could do no wrong, or at least no wrong worth acknowledging. What about the money? I asked. The $47,000 he transferred? That's where things get complicated. Eleanor pulled out another document. The transfers went to an account in your husband's name only. But there's no law against moving money from a joint account to an individual one, as long as it's not done to defraud a spouse in preparation for divorce, which is exactly what he did. Proving intent is difficult. His lawyers will argue that he was simply reorganizing finances, that you had agreed to let him handle the money, that there was no attempt to hide anything from you. I stared at the papers in front of me, all these dry legal documents that represented the wreckage of my life. So he gets away with it? Not necessarily. Eleanor leaned forward. I've been doing this for 22 years, Meredith. I've seen a lot of men like your husband. They're clever, but they're also arrogant. They make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? Let me ask you something. When you bought your house in Brookline, did you review all the documents before signing? I felt a flush of embarrassment. Derek handled most of it. He said it was all standard. Eleanor nodded slowly. I've requested copies of the original mortgage documents. My paralegal noticed something interesting in the preliminary records. The house is titled solely in your husband's name. The words took a moment to penetrate. That's not possible. I signed the papers. I remember signing. You may have signed some papers, but the deed itself? The actual title transfer? Eleanor shook her head. Your name doesn't appear anywhere. I thought I'd run out of capacity for shock. I was wrong. He forged documents? That's what we're investigating. If he did, that's not just grounds for divorce. That's criminal fraud. I left Eleanor's office with my head spinning and walked aimlessly through the streets of Beacon Hill, past the gas lamps and brick sidewalks and beautiful old houses that had once represented everything I wanted from my life in Boston. A home, a family, a sense of belonging. Derek had taken all of it. Not just the money, not just the marriage, but my basic sense of reality. Every memory I had of our life together was now suspect. Every moment I'd thought was real might have been carefully constructed performance. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Award ceremony tonight. You still going? I'd almost forgotten. The New England Sustainable Design Award. The culmination of 2 years of work on the Cambridge project. My project. The one thing Derek hadn't been able to touch. I texted back. Yes. Save me a seat. I went back to Rachel's apartment and put on the one nice dress I'd packed for my trip to Chicago, the green silk I'd intended to wear for my anniversary surprise. It seemed fitting somehow to wear it now, to transform it from a symbol of naive hope into something else entirely. The ceremony was held at the Institute of Contemporary Art, all glass walls and harbor views, and the kind of sleek modernism that made architects feel at home. My firm had taken 2 tables near the front, and my boss Jennifer pulled me into a hug the moment I arrived. I don't know what's going on with you, she murmured in my ear. But whatever it is, I'm proud of you for being here tonight. The evening passed in a blur of champagne and small talk and nervous anticipation. When they finally announced the winner of the Sustainable Design Award, I almost didn't hear my name over the roaring in my ears. Meredith Ashworth, for the Riverside Commons Development in Cambridge. I walked to the stage on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. I accepted the award, an elegant glass sculpture that caught the light in fractured rainbows. I gave a speech I don't remember giving, thanking people I probably forgot to thank. But I remember the applause. I remember looking out at the audience and seeing my colleagues and peers recognizing my work, my talent, my contribution to something meaningful and lasting. Derek had tried to make me small. He'd told Vanessa and Christina that I was cold and distant, too focused on my career, not enough of a wife. But my career wasn't the problem. My career was the one thing that was entirely, authentically mine. The next morning, I received 2 emails that would change everything. The first was from Eleanor Chen. Document examination complete. Your husband forged your signature on multiple legal documents, including the mortgage. We have grounds for criminal charges. The second was from a number I didn't recognize, with an attachment and a brief message. You don't know me, but I worked with your husband at Whitmore Financial until last week. I was fired for raising concerns about irregularities in his client accounts. I thought you should see this. The attachment was a spreadsheet. Client names, account numbers, amounts transferred, destinations unknown. A pattern of small withdrawals spread across dozens of accounts, each one too small to trigger audits, together adding up to something much larger. Derek hadn't just been stealing from me. He'd been stealing from his clients. I forwarded the email to Eleanor and called Rachel. I need to tell you something, I said. It's worse than we thought. It's so much worse. The investigation moved quickly after that. Eleanor connected me with a federal prosecutor who was very interested in the financial irregularities at Whitmore Financial. The firm launched its own internal audit, and Derek was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. His lawyers tried to negotiate. They called Eleanor with offers of settlements, promises that Derek would agree to an uncontested divorce if I would sign a confidentiality agreement and drop any claims against him. The numbers they proposed were insultingly low, amounts that wouldn't even cover the money he'd stolen from our accounts. They're scared, Eleanor said. The criminal exposure is significant. If the federal investigation moves forward, your husband is looking at serious prison time. I thought about accepting. For 1 week moment, I imagined taking the money and walking away, starting fresh somewhere without the exhausting battle that lay ahead. Then I thought about Vanessa, who'd been lied to as thoroughly as I had. About Christina, barely 30 years old, who'd believed she was building a future with a man who was already married. About the clients at Whitmore Financial, whose retirement accounts had been quietly drained. No deal, I said. We go forward. The confrontation with my family was harder. I gathered them at my parents' house in Wellesley on a Sunday afternoon. My mother and father, my sister Amy, who'd cut short her Portugal trip to be there. I told them everything. The affair, the affairs, the money, the forged documents, the fraud. My father, who'd shaken Derek's hand at our wedding and called him son, sat in stunned silence. My mother cried and apologized for ever doubting me. Amy, who'd always been the fierce one in the family, started making a list of people who needed to be told, relationships that needed to be managed, damage that needed to be controlled. We're with you, my father finally said. Whatever you need, we're with you. That night, Derek showed up at the house in Brookline. I'd moved back in on Eleanor's advice to establish my presence in what was legally marital property, regardless of whose name was on the deed. He still had his key, though I'd had the locks changed, and I found him standing on the front porch, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Meredith, please. His voice cracked. Please, can we just talk? I stood in the doorway, the house that should have been ours at my back, and looked at the man I'd loved for over a decade. He was still handsome. Still charming, probably, to anyone who didn't know what lay beneath the surface. There's nothing to talk about, I said. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But I love you. I've always loved you. You don't know what love is, Derek. You know what possession is, what control is, what lies are. I stepped back, my hand on the door. Your lawyers can contact my lawyers. We're done. I closed the door in his face and stood there in the hallway of my stolen home, shaking with something that might have been fear or might have been triumph. The next week, Whitmore Financial terminated Derek for cause. The federal investigation was expanded, and I received an unexpected phone call from a headhunter in Seattle, asking if I'd be interested in a senior partnership position at an architecture firm that specialized in sustainable development. The timing isn't great, I told Rachel. Everything's so uncertain. The timing is perfect, she said. You've been given a chance to start over somewhere nobody knows you as Derek's wife. Somewhere you can just be Meredith. I thought about Boston, this city I'd called home for 15 years. The house that had been stolen from me. The in-laws who'd covered up my husband's betrayal. The colleagues who would forever associate me with scandal. And I thought about Seattle. Rain and mountains and water. Fresh air and fresh starts. A new life built on my own terms, with my own name on the deed. I called the headhunter back. The morning light in Seattle is different from Boston. Softer somehow, filtered through layers of marine clouds that turn everything silvery and new. I wake to it every day now, in my apartment on Capitol Hill with its view of Puget Sound, and every day I'm grateful for the strange path that brought me here. 6 months have passed since that hotel room in Chicago. 6 months since a door opened and my life fell apart, and slowly, painfully, began to reassemble itself into something I didn't recognize but was learning to love. The divorce was finalized last month. The settlement was larger than Derek's lawyers wanted, but smaller than mine argued for. A compromise that left neither side satisfied, but allowed everyone to move forward. The house in Brookline sold for enough to cover my legal fees and give me a fresh start. Derek's portion was seized by the federal government as part of his plea agreement on the fraud charges, 2 years of probation and 5 years of supervised financial monitoring, a slap on the wrist that still felt like a victory. I kept the watch, the vintage Omega I'd bought for our anniversary, the one that never got given. It sits in my jewelry box now, a reminder of who I was and who I've become. Someday I might sell it, or give it away, or just keep it as a talisman of survival. My apartment is small by Boston standards. 1 bedroom, a galley kitchen, a living room just big enough for a couch and my drafting table. But it's mine. Every piece of furniture, every book on the shelf, every plant on the windowsill. I chose it all myself. There's no ghost of Derek here, no memories of lies told in comfortable spaces. Just me and my life, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing exactly where everything belongs. The job has been better than I dared hope. Cascade Architecture specializes in the kind of sustainable development work I've always been passionate about, and my new partners treat me as an equal from day one. Last week, they asked me to lead the design for a mixed-use development in South Lake Union, the biggest project of my career. I said yes without hesitation. My phone buzzes with a text from Vanessa. "Coffee this weekend? I'm in town for a conference." I smile and type back, "Of course, can't wait to see you." Our friendship is one of the stranger gifts to emerge from the wreckage. We met for dinner in Boston 2 months after the hotel room revelation, uncertain whether we had anything in common besides the man who'd betrayed us both. We discovered that we had plenty: a dark sense of humor, a love of bad reality television, a shared determination to build better lives on the ashes of the ones Derek had burned. Vanessa is in therapy now, working through her trust issues and her tendency to believe what she wants to believe rather than what the evidence shows. Christina moved to Denver and is, according to her occasional Instagram posts, dating a veterinarian who looks like the opposite of Derek in every way. I wish her well. I wish them all well. These women who were collateral damage in Derek's narcissistic fantasy. Even Patricia and Emily, Derek's mother and sister who enabled and excused and covered up. I don't forgive them, but I've stopped being angry. Anger takes energy I'd rather spend on other things. My mother visits next week, her first trip to Seattle. She's been apologetic and supportive since everything came out, and while I know she still feels guilty for that moment of doubt on the phone from Chicago, I've tried to help her understand that it wasn't her fault. Derek was convincing. He convinced all of us. The measure of a person isn't whether they got fooled, but what they do once they know the truth. The truth. Such a simple word for such a complicated concept. Here's what I know is true now. I am 45 years old. I am a successful architect. I am divorced from a man who was never who I thought he was. I live alone in a city where nobody knew me before, and I'm building something new from the ground up. Here's what else I know. I am not broken. I was bent, certainly, twisted by years of gaslighting and manipulation and the slow erosion of my own instincts. But bent things can be straightened. Twisted things can be unwound. I am proof of that. I get dressed for work, choosing clothes that feel like me, that I picked out myself without wondering if Derek would approve. I eat breakfast standing at my kitchen counter, scrolling through emails on my phone. There's one from Rachel with a link to an article about sustainable housing and the comment, "Made me think of you." There's one from my sister with photos of her new puppy. There's one from the office about the South Lake Union Project kickoff meeting. And there's one from Derek. I almost deleted unread. That's been my policy for months, ignoring his occasional attempts at contact, letting the silence speak for itself. But something makes me open this one. Meredith, it says, I know you probably won't read this. I know I don't deserve your attention or your time, but I wanted you to know that I'm in treatment now, working on understanding why I did what I did. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking you to know that I'm trying to become someone who would never do those things. I hope you're happy in Seattle. I hope your career is everything you deserve. I hope someday you can think of our years together and find something worth keeping. Derek. I read it twice, then I delete it. Not because I'm angry, not because I don't believe him, but because Derek's journey toward becoming a better person is not my responsibility. I spent 8 years trying to make him happy, trying to be enough, trying to fill the empty places in him that turned out to be bottomless. I don't have to do that anymore. I grab my bag and my keys and head out the door. The hallway of my building smells like coffee and rain, and I nod to my neighbor, an elderly woman named Grace who keeps trying to set me up with her grandson. The elevator takes me down to the lobby, where the morning light streams through tall windows. Outside, Seattle is waking up. People walking dogs, people jogging, people heading to work with coffee cups in hand. The city hums with energy and possibility, and I'm part of it now. One more person building a life in this place of mountains and water and second chances. I walk to the bus stop, my regular route to the office. The bus arrives on time, and I find a seat by the window, watching the city scroll past. Space Needle in the distance. Construction cranes marking new development. The water of Elliott Bay, gray and beautiful. My phone buzzes. A text from my boss. Partners meeting at 10. Big news. At the office, I pour myself coffee and chat with colleagues about weekend plans and project deadlines. At 10, I file into the conference room with the other senior architects, taking my usual seat by the window. I'll get right to it, says Margaret, the founding partner. After 23 years, I've decided to step back from day-to-day operations, which means we need a new managing partner. She pauses, and her eyes find mine. The partners have voted unanimously. Meredith, if you're willing, the position is yours. The room erupts in applause. I sit there stunned, trying to process what I've just heard. Managing partner, the top position at the firm, a responsibility I never imagined taking on, in a city I've only lived in for 6 months, at a company I'm still learning. Can I think about it? I ask. Take the weekend, Margaret says, but I hope you'll say yes. You've earned this. After the meeting, I walk to the window of my office and look out at the city that has become my home. I think about everything that led me here. The hotel room door that opened onto betrayal. The weeks of investigation and legal battle. The decision to leave everything familiar and start again 3,000 miles away. I think about the woman I was, the one who knocked on that door with a vintage watch in her pocket and love in her heart. She seems like a stranger now, someone from another life, but I don't resent her. She did the best she could with what she knew, and when she learned more, she did better. My phone buzzes with a text from Rachel. Heard about the promotion. So proud of you. I smile and type back, thanks. Still processing. Call you tonight. I will take the position. I know that already, even though I told Margaret I needed to think. This is what I've been building toward. All those years of hard work and dedication that Derek tried to diminish as me being too focused on my career. My career was never the problem. My career was the foundation that held me up when everything else crumbled. That evening, I stop by a wine shop on my way home and pick up a nice bottle of champagne. In my apartment, I pour myself a glass and sit by the window, watching the sun set over Puget Sound. The sky turns orange and pink and purple, an impossible watercolor that no artist could capture. I raise my glass to no one in particular. To myself, maybe. To the woman who survived. To the new life that's just beginning. Tomorrow, I'll call my mother and tell her the news. I'll text Vanessa and Rachel and my sister. I'll start planning for the responsibilities ahead. But tonight, I just sit here, in my own apartment, drinking my own champagne, celebrating my own success. The door is locked and only I have the key. That's exactly how I want it. There's a metaphor in there somewhere about doors and keys and who gets to open them, about the power of choosing your own entrances and exits, about the difference between being let in and walking in yourself. But I'm too tired for metaphors tonight. I'm too content to analyze. I just want to sit here in the quiet and feel what it feels like to be wholly, completely, unapologetically myself. The woman who knocked on that hotel room door in Chicago didn't know what waited on the other side. But the woman sitting here now knows something better. She knows that the most important door is the one you open for yourself. She knows that home isn't a place you're given. It's a place you make. She knows that starting over isn't failing. It's the bravest kind of success. I finish my champagne and wash the glass. I check the locks on my front door, not out of fear, but out of the simple pleasure of the ritual. I turn off the lights and look out one more time at the city sparkling in the darkness. Then I go to bed, in my own room, in my own apartment, in my own life, and I sleep peacefully, dreaming of nothing at all.